So welcome everybody to Advanced Bid Writing. This is module 3 of the 4 modules. So hopefully those of I'm recognising some faces and names. So I know quite a few of you have been to module 1 or 2, and if you haven't, hopefully you've managed to catch up with those on the YouTube videos that Richard's really helpfully put online. Today we're talking about standing out and how you explain and have impact. Just before we get going, just a little bit of minor housekeeping stuff. If you can just please keep yourself muted as per normal, just so that doorbells and barking dogs and so on don't interrupt us. I've actually turned my telephone off after an issue before, and we'll have time for questions at the end and during the session. If you can either keep those questions until a point where I say any questions, or make a note in the chat for yourself, that's fine. Richard is here as per usual, helping me to steward and manage things, so if there's any administrative questions, feel free to ask him. Just a reminder, and for those of you who haven't met me, I'm Leah Salinger. I'm a fundraiser working in the sector for the last 17 years. I think I've said it all before, but hopefully I'll try and bring some of the learning to life from my personal experience of writing funding applications over the last 17 years. Okay, so without further ado, we're going to kick off with today's session, and just to kind of put it in context of where we are, the reminder, in module 1 we looked at approaching fundraising, when making strategic decisions about when to bid. In module 2 we looked at the first part of structuring a bid, and we talked about need and solutions, so how to articulate your need, how to look at solutions, and we talked about co-production. And in this third module we're going to talk more about the second part of our kind of case for support, so how to demonstrate impact and added value. And so that's where we're at today. A reminder that this is building on the basics which were covered in the original National Archives training that we did on both case for support and writing applications. So this is the advanced course, taking things a little bit further and looking at a little bit more in depth as to what to do. And you can, just a reminder again for those of you who didn't get a chance, if you wanted to go and review those other modules and the content in them, then I'm just putting the link in the chat box now, so you're very welcome to go and access those resources online if you'd like to. Okay, so we're going to crack on. Just to put in context what we mean, so impact, we're talking about the long-term difference you have as a result of delivering the work which you've identified with the need and the right solution. And added value, we're really focusing here on what makes you the best organisation, person, team, whatever, to deliver it, and how do you really look at those things a bit more creatively and a bit strategically as well. And then finally we're going to go on to module 4 tomorrow, which is where we'll start to look at some of those things around budget and costings. So impact. This is stuff I'm not going to go into in detail, and just a summary of what we mean and a recap on what's meant by impact. So what's meant by impact is how you will change things and what will be different as a result of your work, and particularly the long-term difference, and how you know whether you've achieved it. So we're talking about that bigger strategic change that takes place as you create as an organisation. Today we're going to focus on what we mean the difference between outcomes and impact, and how funders might understand that too, and how we can articulate the difference between outcomes and impact as we go. So what is impact, and what do you mean by it? I mean, it's a big word, and it's probably one you hear a lot, and funders are moving from being outcome-based funders to impact-based funders. And what does that mean? How do you understand what impact is? So I'm going to give you a little quiz in a second, just to test your knowledge. I'm going to be kind and give you some definitions first, though, to help you. So I thought I'd be generous. And these are some different words here that you might see in relation to impact. So impact, the long-term change you want to have as a result. Whereas an outcome is the changes, benefits, learning, or other effects that result from what you do, your activities. So they should have a word of change in it. So maybe that more, less, or increased, for example. An output is a product, service, or facilities that result from what you do, which are your activities, and the activities are things you do. So the activity is running a training course. The output is 30 people attend that training course. The outcome is that 30 people are better at writing funding applications, and the impact might be that your organisations are better funded, as an example. So I'm going to run a poll just to give you a little test on what you think these are. So I'm going to launch that on your screens. on your screens now. You should be able to see that. And there are 4 questions here, and each one of the statements in the quotation marks is either an impact, an outcome, an output, or an activity. So using the definitions that I've given you, impact long term, outcomes, changes and benefits, outputs, things that you do, the things that occur, the facility is a result in what you do, and the activity is the activity, what you do. I want you to give it a go and have a guess. I can see if you everyone see it on the screens. Can you see it, Richard? Give me a thumbs up. Yeah, lovely, brilliant, thank you. So can everyone else see it? I'm just, oh, there we go, some people are voting, fantastic. I was a bit worried no one was voting, like, oh, fab. We've got a couple of people voting now, brilliant. So yeah, have a read through those sentences, have a think. What do you think? Are they impact, outcomes, activities? And I'll show the answers in a minute. Fantastic. That's a great answers. I think I've had 13 so far. So some of you may not be able to see it, I guess, if you're on a phone. But hopefully most of you will be able to. If you have any tech issues, then please do feel free to message Richard directly. Okay, 20 or so people have voted, that's 2/3 of you. So I was going to give it a couple more moments. Anyone else get their votes in? Ooh, this is juicy. I'm quite enjoying this. I will share the results with you so you can see what everyone said. So you can't see individually, but you'll be able to see what everybody said. Over here, I can see them better. Fantastic. Okay. We've got another 30 seconds just for anyone else who wants to respond to do so. But they've had 24 out of 30 people, so that's not bad. That's 77%, says my little thing here. Oh, got it to 80%. Brilliant. Okay, I'll give 10 seconds and I'm just going to end the voting so you can all see the results. Okay. Right. So I'll share these results with you and we'll have a look at them. So I'm just going to pull them over my screen. So the first statement that I asked you to tell me what it was national curriculum topic focused resources shared with teachers. National topic focused resource, that's a bit of a mouthful, isn't it? Oh, yeah, shared teachers. So 84% of you thought it was an output. And I'm delighted to say, yes, you're absolutely right. Those 84% of you were correct. It is an output. So it's a product that is created, and in turn, that creates the outcome. And we'll have a look at how that relates in a moment on the next slide. We'll just finish off this. So question number 2 was, what's this? More teachers use the archive service as a resource. And 64% of you thought it was an outcome. And 28% thought it was an impact. The answer was, most of you got it correct, it was an outcome. Yes, there's a change that's occurring as a result of the work, i.e. more teachers, there's that change word in there, are using the service. The third was, what is this? Pilot sessions with early years children, sorry, pilot sessions, so you read my writing. Pilot sessions with early years children take place. Most of you thought this was an activity, 84%. Once again, gold stars. It is an activity. It is a thing that is happening which creates the output and in turn the outcome. And finally, number 4 was more young users understand what archives are. And most of you, 64%, thought it was an impact and 24% outcome. Actually, it's an outcome, I think, because there's a change word in there, and really importantly, it's measurable, and we're going to look a little bit at how that fits together today. So we can measure that more young users understand archives are. So therefore, it is a change that incurs as the work done, and I would argue it's an outcome, but there is a grey area, it is a hazy area. So I'm going to move on, and I'm just going to show you how we can think about outcomes and impact and so on in in relation to each other, and a way of thinking about, is something an impact, is something an outcome. And I'm going to put these in the kind of form of what is known as a theory of change, and some of you may have come across the ideas of theory of change or have them in your own organisations potentially. And a theory of change is a logic framework basically for understanding change and the way that your services link to your impact. It's a way to link impact, outcomes, outputs and activities together that explains your project. And I'll talk particularly about how it helps you create change which is not measurable. So the activities here, you can see there are two kinds of activities, and you'll see the sentences are the same as the ones we just used in our poll. So pilot sessions with early years children take place, new archive-based lesson plans are developed, which leads to a couple of outputs. We have lesson plans are made available to teachers as an output, a lesson plan, and there's curriculum-based resources are shared with teachers. So there's two outputs created by our activities. And those outputs in turn lead to outcomes, and those outcomes are related to each other. So by giving them lesson plans and resources, teachers increase their understanding of how to use archives in their lessons. As a result, more teachers, again that change word there, increase, more teachers use archive services as a resource, and again in turn more young users understand what archives are. So the outcomes are sequential and caused by each other. And what they ultimately lead to, if I click the right arrow, is the impact. And the impact is much broader, and I would argue probably quite immeasurable. Children grasp the then and now concept and enjoy in an accessible way. Actually, that's a really hard thing to kind of capture and measure. And also, you may not have ultimate control over that impact. So for example, if the teaching quality, the quality of the teacher using these resources is really rubbish and not engaging the kids, then it might not have the intended impact, but you can measure the outcomes. So for example, teachers increase their understanding of how to use archives in their lessons. That outcome, we could measure that through surveys, for example, with teachers who use resources. We could test the understanding of young users by asking them questions, by doing surveys, by focus groups. There's lots of ways of reviewing that, but we can measure those things using a baseline or a metric to do so. So your impact is that broader, longer term change, which is you're part of the solution towards it. Because for children to grasp the then and now concept and enjoy in its best of the way, this is just one way to do it, using those resources. Another way might be something which is completely unrelated to your organisation, is being done by a teacher, a school, or even something outside of the education field completely. It could be parents, taking their kids to see artefacts in real life or going to museums with their children. You maybe aren't influencing that through these activities around resources aimed at teachers. So thinking about impact is thinking bigger and longer term and higher level. And whereas your outcomes are things that you can try and measure. So why use this model? And I've kind of introduced this theory of change model as an interesting way of thinking about what you do in relation to what that produces, the outputs, how that creates change and how it creates impact. And it helps you understand what the difference between your impact and your outcomes are. Why bother? Why bother with this whole idea of impact and outcomes, Leah? Because it's all a bit confusing. Well, there's a few reasons. And one is that funders increasingly are looking at asking the question, what is the impact you're having? So you need to understand the difference between impact and outcomes. But there's another reason which helps you with your fundraising, which is that you can sell the same project to lots of different funders without creating different projects at the same time. So in the previous sessions, we've talked about kind of strategy, thinking about which funder, putting yourself in funder shoes, what a funder's interested in, and how does it all fit together. And actually, with this kind of model, you can highlight, or I can talk about using lenses and like highlighting really enhancing some outcomes that a particular funder might be interested in. If you had an activity which had two different kinds of outcomes, some very educational, some very community focused. Someone who's very interested in the educational part, you can highlight those outcomes. Someone's into the community part, highlight those outcomes, but you're still delivering the same project and you're still getting the same impact. So you get the same project, but you're delivering the same work. And what that means is that because you're delivering the same work and not reinventing the project for different funders, it makes it easier for you to manage and monitor the project. and report on the outcomes and the changes in terms of the evaluation. So looking at this example, if you've got a funder who's interested in teachers and educators, what you do is you're selling them, you're highlighting the lesson plans and activities and outputs, and the outcome is increased understanding and use. If you had another funder, using the same example on the screen, who likes children's learning, just sell them the pilot sessions, children's input, and increase in young users. You're still delivering the same work, you're still measuring the same things, you're still using the same evaluation tools, but what you're doing is minimizing the efforts and potentially also minimizing that risk of mission drift we talked about in module 1, where you're going. So understanding your project as a whole, and that impact is like the kind of ultimate point where you're trying to get to, that's why you're trying to do it and what's going to lead to it, can help you really think about the logic and selling it to funders. My final point on this really, and why it can be a really useful tool, thinking about a theory of change type approach to this, is that just going through the process can be as important as the theory of change model at the end of it. Because that, when we talked yesterday, we talked in the previous module about kind of the process of putting it together and the co-production and that, you know, the kind of process of designing a solution. This is part of that process. And the more you think about it, the more you minimize risk of mission drift, of doing things because that don't work, that don't lead you in the right direction. This all brings it together and helps you think through the logic of each project. Do you remember I said something about how smaller funding bids might feel like notionally simpler, easier to do, yeah? But if you do a long one, you have to do all the thinking, and actually your project's better because of it. This is a really good example of that process for thinking through it. And one just little minor point on the other end is that sometimes we're increasingly seeing funders asking for theory of change actually as part of the application process. It is something that is happening with organisations, and the Arts Council have done it recently. So it is something worth thinking about as a process. Okay, that's what I wanted to talk about with impact, is the difference between impacts and outcomes. Outcomes being measurable and leading to your wider impact, which is perhaps beyond just you and may not be measurable. And understanding the difference and the logic between them is really going to help you in selling your project. Okie dokes. We're going to move on. And we're going to talk about the fourth element in our case for support, and that was added value. What do you mean by added value? Well, added value. Why you or your organisation the best place to deliver the work, what your track record or past experience is, for example, and what you bring. Why you? Basically, what's your USP? Why you as opposed to any other application on a pile of applications? And what we're going to think about today is, in relation to this, is how do you choose what added value to talk about when? So kind of thinking back to the previous module, we talked about whose shoes you're standing in, you know, what does that person want to see? Using some of that learning to think about, well, how do you choose which elements of added value to bring up? So what are the kinds of things that you might think about in explaining added value? Firstly, skills and experience. And often we overlook sometimes the, you know, really think about kind of our CVs in the arts world, for example. It's really common to really talk about the artist's value and put their CV in, explain what their background is. And sometimes we underestimate our own staff and the amazing skills and talents that they have. Board members or volunteers, who's going to be involved in delivering something and why they're unique or special. We can use testimonials or case studies to really highlight why we're special and why we're you know, good at this particular work. Or what partners have we got that really add something unique to this work as well. And that might be within the project or more broadly. So actually we can expand the project, we can reach, we can use our learning from this to out to a network, for example. And that's that partnerships bit as well. Are there any awards or recognition from anyone else? Is there anyone else recognised that we're really good at this? And can you, basically, it's your chance to show off. You know, can you highlight how amazing you are? And look, we've won this award, or we've, you know, been recognised in this way. I mean, you can reach out to, you know, a big audience to our social media, which is really well used because we've got a really creative Twitter following. You know, during lockdown, there was I can't remember which museum, or someone else will probably tell me, where they had the security guard tweeting about kind of things going on in the museum while it was shut, and it got quite, you know, a lot of press traction and attention. And then, yeah, thinking about this partnership. So, what's your place in your ecosystem? Where are you in the local community or in group of organisations that you work around, have you got any added value in a way of disseminating, sharing or engaging with people, for example, depending on what the project is, bringing together resources or sharing them? Who are those partnerships that only you have? Just some things to think about, the ways of highlighting your value. Okay, and this is where I want you to think about what is most relevant. I love this pie chart, you know, because I think there's a real need sometimes when we're fundraising to tell everyone what we want to say, and you just feel like, oh, of course they're going to want to know that. I think it's really important, and so what you want to say and what they're interested in aren't always the same thing. And actually, the happy point is that cross section, and that's the key thing in your fundraising bits, not just with added value across everything, but particularly in this area. You know, by all means, emphasize your credentials, but do it in a way that relates to the project, you know. And I think there's a temptation as well sometimes just to throw the kitchen sink at this section, just to go, this is, you know, this is everything we're great at. This is our entire, you need to know this about us because we're so great. Actually, it can detract. So thinking about what is relevant is most useful. And so I've got an exercise that we're going to go into breakout rooms to discuss, which is the PDF that was sent down with the joining instructions, which looks a bit like this. Oh, no, I've lost it. There it is. Looks a bit like that. So exercise 3 is called added value, and it's an example of the Children's Knowledge Centre, which was the made-up example we used in module 1, I think it was, and they've got a grant maker that they've identified, the Marshmallow Foundation, who supports organisations that increase the public's knowledge of key historical figures in the children's area, demonstrate high quality vision, and are committed to ongoing research and development. So you've then got a list of about 10 credentials that you could choose to highlight in your application to the Marshmallow Foundation. What I'd like you to do in your breakout groups, and we'll give ourselves about sort of 10 minutes or so once we get in there, just to go and have a look, is to have a think about which of these, which if you had to pick 3, and only 3, which would the Marshmallow Foundation be most interested in? Okay, I'm going to put you into breakout rooms now. As Richard said in the chat, breakout rooms aren't recorded, so do feel free to have your cameras on. I'm going to create. So thanks for that, everyone. So Richard's recording again now, but just hopefully that was useful thing to think about. And I imagine that I'm wondering whether you all got the same ideas or actually you got different ones. I thought I might just ask someone from each group to just tell me which 3 they might have chosen. So I'm just going to look at my screen and go with the order of people I've got on there. So please let me know. So Phil Boot, I've got there. Are you able to tell me? I know which ones actually, but you can tell everyone else which 3 you went for as your options. Oh, you're muted. You unmute yourself. Sorry.
We picked the. Let me just grab the screen. We picked the first one.
Yep.
And the second from last.
Yeah, it's number 7. I'm calling that.
And number 4, the
archive.
Yeah,
the Nobel Prize one. Brilliant, thank you. We introduced everyone else. So Michelle, you're in a different group. Michelle Hewitt, I'm looking at, so I can see you. Just happened to be at the top of my screen. Which ones did you go for? Oh, you need to unmute yourself. Sorry. You unmute yourself. Read it. There we go.
Sorry. Yeah, we chose 3, 4, and 6.
Interesting. They're quite diverse, I imagine. I've got James next.
Because we felt it hit all 3 criteria, we thought.
Which was the same reason Phil gave as well. So it's really interesting.
Yeah.
But,
yeah.
So yeah, I've got James Peters next. If you unmute yourself first, sorry, I can't hear you.
I think the group went for 1, 3, and 4, although I quite liked 6 about the newts as a research and development.
Excellent. Interesting. So some commonality coming up here. Thank you. I've got Philip Jeffs as my next picture. Were you in either of the other 2 groups? If not, unmute yourself, please.
Sorry, having to remind us every time to unmute. We had the one about the Nobel Prize winner, like everybody else.
Yeah.
We had the first one.
Yeah.
The special school. And we had, let's see, the one about the interactive exhibit.
Okay, so number 3. Yeah, winning the award. Interesting. So 3 and 4 definitely seem to be the most popular. Thank you, Philip. I've got Christopher next. I don't know if he was in one.
So same breakout room as Philip, actually. So,
okay, right, lovely. Oh, well, thank you.
I endorse his choice in 100%.
Brilliant. I had Karen next. Have you been either of those groups, Karen?
I was in that room too.
Wonderful. That's okay. That's fine. And I know Vic was in the same room as one of our Phils, so I'm not going to ask there. I've got this lady here. His name. Sorry, I can't see your first name, but
oh, Sarah. Sorry.
Sorry, okay, Sarah.
Hi. So yes, we thought the first one, the school connection, and the second one, the funding track record. High quality provision and ongoing commitment to research and development.
Mm-hmm.
Not sure about a third. We thought probably the archive, if we can tell a good story about what we're doing with it.
The Nobel Prize winning.
Yeah.
So you were a bit kind of unsure as to which ones to go for. What's in your group then?
Yeah. It was interesting to talk through and see, hear different views. Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, fantastic. Thank you. I've got Marion next. Who's unmuted already, I think.
I was in the same group as Philip Jeffs.
Okay, lovely. Thank you. I've got Joanne on my next.
Hi, yeah, I've noticed I was the only one in. I've volunteered because everyone else didn't have their cameras on. But yeah, we thought the Nobel letters for the historical figures. High quality provision was the awards that they had won, including the interactive exhibit. And research and development we struggled with, actually. We thought maybe there was something in the newts, or maybe we could make more about the connection with the local school.
Yeah,
that's kind of research angle there.
Okay, brilliant. Karen has appeared. So I think you've got something to tell us.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi. We chose number 1, the SEN of 4 and 7. So that was looking towards the local people from the local area focus. But then we were taken with the newts. Perhaps if that was more going down a research in the number 3 of the criteria. So in that case, we went for 3, 6, and 8. So we were kind of 2 halves.
Okay, that's a bit of disagreement.
Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. Any of the groups that I've not picked, just feel free to unmute yourself and put it in the. Oh, someone's put them in the. Is that who put that in the chat? Is that Richard? Yeah. If anyone wants to give me their group results who hasn't, please either put them in the chat or unmute yourself. Otherwise, I assume I think I've got most of them there. So fantastic. Thank you, everyone. Really interesting. So there was some really clear favourites. I think nearly all of you chose number 4, which was about the archive, including a collection of letters and papers from local Nobel Prize winner for literature. So most of you, all of you chose that, I think. And then a few of you picking up on, the centre being the Sen, the link to the Sen School, and the interactive exhibit on local river life. So there's some really strong things, but actually some real dissent as well. And I think the point is that you need to do your research. You need to understand, tying it to the project, tying it to the funder's interest, and really thinking about what's the best way of exhibiting it. And really interestingly, all of you tried to meet there were 3 kind of criteria, and you all tried to meet each of the criteria with one thing each. And actually, you may not want to do that. You may feel that, we don't really, because one person said, actually, we weren't really sure about the research and development bit. But it may be that you don't have credentials to demonstrate the research and development bit. And actually, you want to show that in a different way. And actually, you can really use your credentials to big yourself up in one particular area, because that's where you have key strength. And actually, rather than necessarily trying to use credentials to make yourself look good in an area where you don't have the key strengths, could be your undoing. So you may actually want to really focus how you use your key strengths in the area that plays up and shows you off in the best way. And actually, it might be that one of the areas of their focus of support you're not particularly strong in. So how do you express that in different ways? And it might be about a commitment to learning or a journey that you're on, necessarily something you've got in the past. So using that in your back pocket is a nice way to think about how to address your funders' criteria as well. Okay, thank you for that. Thank you for those of you who spoke as well. I really appreciate it, and getting your insights, and hopefully you can see how there's one answer to this. Okay, so I'm just going to really quickly just whiz back to my PowerPoint. Actually, do you know what? I'm never going to bother. All it says is Module 4 is on Thursday, which is on the 25th of June at 2 o'clock and 8 o'clock. And now we've got sort of 10 minutes or so for questions. So just wanted to open the floor up to you guys for questions and anything about impact, about added value, so on. Feel free to unmute yourself and speak to me directly, or to type a message in the chat and I'll read it out so everyone can hear it and respond to it that way. So I'll give you a few minutes to think about any questions you have about anything we discussed today. No one's jumping up and shouting at me. I'm going to tell it's a good sign. Oh, Marion is waving. Hello, Marion.
Hi. Have you got any suggestions of further reading?
With regards theory of change in particular?
Advanced fundraising, generally, impact, all the rest of it.
Ah, good question. I
mean, websites, anything, books, articles, whatever.
I don't know. Richard, any ideas? Yeah, I'll have a think. I'm not sure. Any ideas?
On the spot.
Regarding theory of change, there's lots of good writing from New Philanthropy Capital.
Yeah.
Worth Googling. With fundraising itself, I would. There are so many different places to look. I would look at somewhere like NCVO firstly for fundraising advice.
Yeah, they don't have that much in that. Good question though.
I was thinking of the know-how non-profit section.
There's not a lot of know-how about it at all. It's a really good question. I don't know if it is, but I think because it's difficult to articulate in form. I will keep thinking, and if we think of anything, we can let you know, Mary, at Module 4. I'll have our brains. Had some other questions coming on the chat, but yeah, Jan, I think, has just answered some points for you, Marion, as well, some ideas of what works. Yeah, and theory of change, I mean, MPC have got a couple of really nice guides to how to do it and so on, so it's useful to look at there. Lorna's asked about previous potential pitfalls in talking about previous successful bids. Oh, and I guess the only pitfall I could think of is making yourself look too good. And we don't need your money because we're so good at winning fundraising applications and we're so good at writing good different projects. But I think that's your only kind of pitfall I could think about, and I think you can mitigate that by just being really clear, and we'll talk about budget in the next module, about understanding what the need is financially as well as what the need is for the service. So that, and I think, yeah, I don't know, I think generally funders like to see that you're a good, well-run organisation, and evidence of you winning applications and bids in the past is a really positive thing. But, I don't know, Rich, jump in if you can think of anything. No.
I'm still answering the other questions, sorry.
Sorry. So yeah, if you can think of anything about previous pitfalls about talking about previous successful bids. I say anything I think is overfunding and stuff, but no, I can't think.
No, it's the main one.
Yeah, and then Joanne, any advice on how to keep bids focused? I imagine that people want to add their favourite projects in, even if not relevant. Do you think it dilutes the bid or makes achievements better? I think that's a really, really good point, and it comes to that Venn diagram around what you want to say and what the funder wants to hear, and making sure it's relevant. And yeah, absolutely, it's being a bit critical. So I think one of the things you can always do with any kind of written application or form is to get somebody external to read it, because quite often when somebody external to your organisation reads it, and that might just be a partner, friend, neighbour, whatever, when they read it, actually they'll be like, why have you said that? Doesn't seem to make any sense. It doesn't seem to add any value. Sometimes getting someone external to look at that, because you're right, people do want to say, oh, I'm really proud of that, or I really like that thing, I want to squeeze it in. And I would argue that if it doesn't demonstrate what you're trying to prove, then it probably does dilute the bid. So thinking about that relevance, that magic bit in the middle of the Venn diagram, that's your key. That would be my response to that. Any other questions at all? Yeah, I'm struggling to answer Marion's question. Sorry. I think my advice thinking about Marion is to use potential resource you've got in this room, virtual room, and actually maybe look at other people's bids. I think one of the things that's really useful is just looking at other people's applications, and always using some of the knowledge and learning you get from doing this kind of training course, and go, well, oh, I can see how they've done that really well, or oh, I don't like, and actually use colleagues either from within your organisation or other organisations, and do kind of like a confidential bid share. You can maybe share a successful and unsuccessful one, and just have a kind of relationship with someone, another organisation. It doesn't even have to be in the archive sector. If you're worried about confidentiality, maybe choose, contact a fundraiser who has a completely different sector to you, someone in health or something. And actually, sometimes that can be quite useful in that you're not bringing your own knowledge and your own assumptions to it. You can actually read something from a sector you know nothing about, and look at it and go, hold on a minute, I don't know if I understand that. So maybe try that. In the first module, I handed out the resource on where to look for funding opportunities, and in that I think we mentioned fundraising chat, which was the Facebook group for fundraisers, and you can always ask in that. There's also things like the Institute of Fundraising have the Trust and Statutory Special Interest group, which has a online forum, and there's quite often in that group, again, it's across the charitable sector, but all fundraisers who will often ask to say, oh, can anyone want to do a bid swap with me, just so we can compare and contrast. So you can use those networks as well. So I think that's always a good way to learn. Cool. Richard's put some advice and some bits and bobs in the chat as well. Thanks, Richard. Fantastic. A few more minutes. If anyone else has got any burning questions, feel free to unmute yourself, give me a wave, or stick something in the chat. That's fine. Okay, nothing coming through at the moment. So if you want to stop recording, Richard, and then we'll say goodbye. And thank you very much, and hopefully see you for the last module on Thursday.